Welcome to episode 12 of Let's Rage Together, a podcast where two friends talk about the politics of total liberation and related topics.
We annihilated the world before your very ears.
You can't handle the truth.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 12 of Let's Rage Together. I'm Taryn,
And I'm Pete.
and today we are discussing whether or not we are too negative. We are going to be diving into two listener emails today, one of which relates mostly to our previous episode and raises a few points that maybe a lot of you agree with or have been thinking listening to the podcast. So we thought we'd just kind of break it up and answer each point and clarify a few things about us and about our opinions and our views. And you can email us and let us know what you think as well.
We pick up that some people have similar sentiments, so we just thought it was a good idea to address it and actually use it as a template for this whole episode.
Yeah, and then the second email we got relates more to self-care and feelings of guilt and escapism. So we're not going to do our regular bad and rad section today. We're just going to go straight into these emails because they cover quite a wide variety of topics. So Pete, maybe you can just start with reading the first email.
Okay, cool. So the first email is from Paul, and it says, "Hi, I have just finished listening to your episode 11 podcast. To give you some background information about myself, I have been a vegan for just over 1 month and a vegetarian before that for 6 months. A few of your discussion points had me rather perplexed and confused. I noticed a common trend where you chose to concentrate on an exception rather than the norm. I simply don't understand this rhetoric, especially where veganism is definitely in the minority in South Africa. I believe it is of utmost importance to focus on all things positive regarding veganism. I have watched countless documentaries and done my own research on adopting a vegan diet. Sorry if I use the word diet or if I should rather say way of life. There is concrete proof of the advantages of this diet, which definitely includes weight loss. Without much effort at all, I lost 7 kilograms. This will definitely occur with most people who choose to follow this diet. Obviously, if you choose to go vegan but then follow a horrible diet based on your desire for vegan desserts, you'll put on weight. Why actually mention this exception? This very comment might have dissuaded somebody from adopting the vegan lifestyle. I simply don't understand your way of thinking. The proof in reducing cancer and other life-threatening diseases has been proven over and over again. Focus on the positives. I will never deny somebody their freedom of expression and opinion, which you both have full right to. The topic of abortion is extremely sensitive and full of controversy. Just as you have your opinion on the latest bill being passed in Alabama, you have to accept that many people feel strongly against abortion, and this is based on strong religious beliefs. Pete, you said that it is very important to base content on fact. In the podcast, you said the latest bill was passed by a bunch of white Republican males. The governor of Alabama is female. Did you know this? Maybe follow some of your own advice and do your own research. Gary Yourofsky is a legend. This is my opinion, which is obviously not the same as yours. The amount of good that he has done for the vegan movement far outweighs some of his controversial speeches. At the end of the day, why are we vegan? For me, it's for the animals. Gary has more than likely converted more people to veganism than any other person. The more vegans, the more animals saved, and I'm very happy with this. Nobody said this movement would be easy, and sometimes it can be very uncomfortable. I don't personally approve of the wording which he used. The man is passionate and definitely went over the top. I don't believe you can simply just tell people to completely ignore him. Let people listen to him and make their own decisions. Once again, you seem to have focused on the negative rather than more positive actions. I will leave you with this thought. Nelson Mandela was directly involved in the murder of many people during his anti-apartheid movement, murder being the ultimate crime. Yet he is remembered as a hero, and rightly so, for what he did. Gary has killed no person. Please focus more on the positives. Vegans are few and far between. Yes, we are growing, which is very positive. Let's work together and stop promoting this divisive thinking. Thank you for the podcast. I'll welcome any response. For the animals.
So thank you very much, Paul, for emailing us and taking the time to listen to our podcast. We're just going to break that up into the different points so that we can address each kind of concern one at a time and explain our perspective a little bit better, especially in situations where we might not have been clear on where we stand. Okay, so the first point that we're going to address is where Paul says, I noticed a common trend where you chose to concentrate on an exception rather than the norm. I simply don't understand this rhetoric, especially where veganism is definitely in the minority in South Africa. I believe it is of utmost importance to focus on all things positive regarding veganism. I've watched countless documentaries and done my own research on adopting a vegan diet. Then he goes on to say there is concrete proof of the advantages of this diet, which definitely includes weight loss. So here Paul's referring to us talking about being careful of sharing facts about veganism that may be fat shaming or slightly biased or misrepresented by the headline, for example.
Or overpromising.
Yeah, or overpromising it as like a miracle diet or miracle cure. And also talking about the exceptions is kind of pointing towards the comment that I made about the fact that I've actually gained weight since going vegan because I enjoy vegan treats. So that's kind of what he was referring to if you haven't listened to the episode. So then he says, without much effort at all, I lost 7 kilograms. This will definitely occur with most people who choose to follow this diet. Paul then goes on to say, obviously, if you choose to go vegan but then follow a horrible diet based on your desire for vegan desserts, you will put on weight. Sorry, I'm laughing because I have a horrible desire for vegan desserts. And
No, I do too.
I just find it funny because it sounds really condescending, Paul, to be honest. Like, yes, I have a desire for vegan desserts. Stop judging me. Then he says, why actually mention this exception? This very comment might have dissuaded somebody from adopting the vegan lifestyle. I simply don't understand your way of thinking. The proof in reducing cancer and other life-threatening diseases has been proven over and over again. Okay, so Pete, what do you want to say to this part of the email?
Okay, so firstly, I just want to address that we actually aren't focusing on the exceptions. We are merely pointing out that there are many exceptions, like he says. There are many vegans who would be considered fat or overweight, many vegans who suffer from diseases and illness, and many vegans who love junk food and don't focus much on their health and have a desire for vegan desserts. So I don't actually personally think this is the exception. Many ethical vegans don't focus on health and haven't lost weight going vegan. So I think it's just as anecdotal to say why focus on the exception when you cannot say that it's the exception.
Yeah, and I think if you listen to what we were actually saying, and the thing is, the question we were answering in that episode actually relates back to a previous episode, so maybe you can go listen to that one as well. But basically what we were saying is to just be critical in what you share and what you are supporting and promoting, and just to clarify that yes, you might be sharing facts about health and facts about disease risk reducing benefits. There's nothing wrong with that, but just to be critical about that and realize that it's not always going to be the case, and that there are fat vegans and there are unhealthy vegans and there are sick vegans, and that's not necessarily related to veganism or lack thereof.
And it's also not a bad thing.
Yeah, and it's just to say that you can't promise people that they're going to lose weight or cure all their diseases if they go vegan, because that's just a lie. Yes, there might be benefits for a lot of people, but just be critical in the way that you portray that information. That's all we were saying.
You also can't tell people that who are healthy, that they won't get sick or won't get diseases if they go vegan into the future. It's not a preventative cure either.
Yeah, and also in terms of the weight comment, you can't say that most people will lose weight. Not everybody wants to lose weight. So that's quite a fat shaming comment to say, you will lose weight and you're going to dissuade people from going vegan if you tell them that they might not. Not everybody wants to lose weight.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't saying that I've gained weight as necessarily a negative thing. It's not something that everyone wants to do. Not everyone wants to be, so-called skinny. And I think that that's quite a problematic way to look at it, because a lot of people are actually underweight and really don't want to lose weight. So you might be dissuading them by saying you will definitely lose weight if you go vegan, because it's just not true. It's all about balancing your diet and, planning your diet according to what you want in terms of your health. Or for some people, not really even planning your diet other than what is necessary to be healthy, because you're vegan for ethics, not for health.
Paul also says that without much effort at all, I lost 7 kilograms, and he's only been vegan for a month. That's a really big deal to lose 7 kilograms in a month. And I mean, if that was your goal, then big ups to you. Well done. Like, that's a massive achievement. But you also can't say this will definitely occur with most people, because that is also based on your experience. I think that you lost an exceptional amount of weight in a month.
And for some people, that amount of weight loss would actually be dangerous. So that would dissuade. If you told me you're going to lose 7 kilograms in a month, I would probably be a bit worried, because I don't really want to lose 7 kilograms in 1 month.
Yeah, and I think that to say this will definitely occur with most people who choose to follow this diet is literally based on your experience, which is just anecdotal evidence. There's no way to back it up.
Yeah, and on the note of anecdotal evidence, when I said, when I made the comments about me gaining weight, it was just a light-hearted comment. It wasn't me trying to use anecdotal evidence to prove what will happen for everyone going vegan for the rest of time. It was just pointing out that there are exceptions. And yeah, if you're going to adopt a plant-based diet for health reasons to lose weight, you probably will. Like for like, an average Western diet versus an average vegan diet, a vegan burger versus a animal-based burger is going to be healthier. It's going to be lower in calories. It's going to be lower in fat. All of those things, sure, that makes sense. You probably will lose weight if that's your goal and that's how you're planning your meals. But if you're just, eating what you want to eat, you might gain weight if you are a treat fiend like me, and there's nothing wrong with that. So please don't take it as me using it as some kind of anecdotal evidence to support that what happened to me is going to happen to everyone. I was just pointing out that, it is an exception, and you can't make these overarching promises.
Yeah, because anyone can find arguments for and against the health benefits of veganism. And it's actually why personally, when I speak to people about veganism, that I often just don't talk about health. Not that you shouldn't, and if you feel confident to, then go ahead. But I have just found that because anyone can find arguments for and against the health benefits, it can be dangerous to overpromise what veganism can do to you or frame it as a cure-all for everything, because it just isn't.
No doubt, there is evidence. There is evidence for reducing risk. But I think the main point that we were trying to make, and we continuously make, is if you are arguing for the health benefits of veganism, just be careful, because there are a lot of people who are very resistant to veganism and who will do anything to poke holes in the logic. And with science-based claims, specifically regarding health and diets, there's so many unknowns. There's so much in medical advancements that are still poorly understood. And there's still so much research to be done. There's still a lack of longitudinal studies for a lot of these things. So it's quite easy to poke holes just because we don't have the evidence yet. The evidence might be there. The facts might be there. But there's still a lot to be discovered and, better understood. So we are just cautioning against overpromising. That's all we're doing. We're not saying that there aren't health benefits. We aren't saying that, if you have high cholesterol, a plant-based diet is probably going to help you. If you have high blood pressure, yes, there's evidence to say that it's probably going to help you. It's a really good way to help with blood pressure. There are reduced risks for a lot of cancers, but that's just correlation a lot of the time. It's not this cold hard fact that's going to apply to everyone. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think we aren't trying to concentrate on the exceptions, but it's important to mention them because they matter. And I just wanted to point out as well that Paul said that veganism is in the minority in South Africa. Well, it's in the minority everywhere. Mark the Vegan has a video where he tries to work out how many vegans there are in the world. He estimates that roughly about 1% of the Earth's population are vegan. Even in cities like Berlin, like London, like, Tel Aviv, veganism is also in the minority. Even though those are probably the biggest populations of vegans, it's like maybe 3%. I'm not 100% sure myself, but by far veganism is in the minority everywhere, not just in South Africa.
Yeah, there are a lot of different estimates that range from like 1 to 3%, and it's kind of hard to measure as well, because you'll find a lot of the surveys will talk about vegan or vegetarian or plant-based, and the definitions in the surveys are sometimes a little bit dodgy, or it's not really clear what's defined as vegan. Is it just plant-based, or is it ethical veganism, or is it a permanent thing, or is it something you're just trying out? There's a lot of surveys where they'll say, plant-based diets are on the increase. But what the survey was actually looking at is an increase in the consumption of plant-based foods. It doesn't mean that the people buying those, they might say, yes, I'm buying this more or more willing to go vegan, but it's not necessarily saying that they are full-time vegans. Well, that sounds weird because to me, you can only be a full-time vegan. But do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily clear in those surveys what they're actually measuring. So
or even people who eat mostly plant-based but don't identify as vegan. Some of the surveys even include eating fish and having dairy as part of the vegan category, so there's a lot of flaws. So I think basically just what we're trying to get at is that it's just really important to be careful of what you share, and also to be careful of using anecdotal evidence and presenting it as empirical evidence. And I would also really stress that it's important to focus on tone when we speak about things, such as losing weight, because talk about heart disease, talk about maybe reduced risk of cancer, things that don't shame people. But I think I would highly recommend listening to the Bearded Vegans episode on fat shaming in the vegan community. It has a really good perspective. But that's kind of all I wanted to say about that point, I think. Do you have anything else?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Just be critical, and we are not making any sweeping claims either. We're just saying, there are exceptions, and that's fine. Okay, so carrying on with Paul's email, he says a big, in all caps, focus on the positives. I'll never deny somebody their freedom of expression and opinion, which you both have full right to. The topic of abortion is extremely sensitive and full of controversy, just as you have your opinion on the latest bill being passed in Alabama. You will have to accept that many people feel strongly against abortion, and this is based on strong religious beliefs. Pete, you said that it is very important to base content on fact. In the podcast, you said the latest bill was passed by a bunch of white Republican males. The governor of Alabama is female. Did you know this? Maybe follow some of your own advice and do your own research. So I just want to say, before you respond to this, Pete, because it's mostly directed at you, that in the last episode, if you haven't listened to it, we just briefly discussed the abortion bill in Alabama as one of my bads. So the nature of the bad and rad section that we normally have is just a quick discussion of something that we think is rad or bad. So we didn't really go into a lot of detail, and maybe we should have. So we're going to unpack it a little bit more now. So maybe you can start just by responding to what Paul said, Pete.
But just before I respond, I also want to say I don't know how much detail we needed to go into, because just so everyone knows, we identify firmly as feminists, as pro-choice, and both of us are atheists. So just so you know what perspective we are coming from. Firstly, everyone has the right to their freedom of expression and opinion for sure, except for when it infringes or violates on the rights of and invalidates the very existence of someone else and their opinion and expression. We do accept that there are people who feel strongly against abortion, just as we feel strongly that people shouldn't infringe of the rights of others to choose. Choose what they deem best for their own lives, choose to make their own decisions. How can you respect someone's strong feelings when they invalidate the feelings, opinions, and even the very existence and freedom of choice of other people? Unless the freedom you are talking about can be reciprocated, it is invalid, and I don't feel like that opinion deserves any space or respect. I was just making a general statement about the fact that the vast majority of the people who voted in favor of the bill were straight, white, cis Republican men. We know that the governor, Kay Ivey, and one of the bill's sponsors, actually, Terry Collins, are self-identifying women, but that doesn't actually change the fact that the vast majority of the people who voted for the bill were men. So based on my research, there are only 4 women, all of them Democrats, in the entire Alabama 35-seat Senate, 27 of whom are Republicans.
Yeah, so all of the senators who voted in favor were men. There were women involved as well, like the governor signing off on the bill,
and the sponsors of the bill.
Yeah.
But the people who voted for it were straight, white cis Republican men, most of whom were probably Christian as well.
Yeah. So on that note, I just wanted to say as well, women can also uphold patriarchy. And I don't know if we discussed this much. We did an episode, I think it was episode 5 on feminism. If you haven't listened to that, Paul, please do listen to it if you are interested. I don't know if we discussed this at all because it was a very introductory discussion on feminism, but women can also uphold patriarchy. It's also important to note that the women involved in this are very privileged white women.
And very conservative.
So it's almost irrelevant that they were part of it because they are part of the problem. Just because they are women doesn't mean necessarily that they are doing feminism any good. Okay? Because a lot of the women who will very much suffer at the hands of this bill are going to be minority women who are poor, many of them living in poverty, and cannot access good healthcare. They can't just fly to another state, as we said, if they need access to an abortion. So it's kind of irrelevant, honestly, that there are women involved, because there are women who will perpetuate patriarchal norms that are damaging to the most vulnerable women.
I was making a statement on it being generally men. It is irrelevant that there were two women involved, because just because there's a woman involved doesn't make something feminist or pro-feminist. They are actually anti-feminist.
Yeah, exactly. Feminism is for men and women and all people who identify in any way, any sexual orientation, any gender. It is about equality for genders. And the fact of the matter is, the men who were voting will never have to worry about having an abortion or needing access to an abortion. Abortion is going to happen whether this bill is passed or not. Yeah. Sometimes people need abortions for a variety of reasons, or decide that that is what is best for them. Now, you mentioned having a religious basis for this belief, and we acknowledged in the previous episode as well that having an abortion is not a decision that anyone should take lightly at all. And I think I even mentioned that I think there should be a lot of support, counseling, guidance, all sorts of things to make that decision, in a way that is beneficial to the person making that decision. If you yourself are opposed to abortion, don't get one.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Being pro-life, as you call it, is just anti-choice. So we are pro-choice because the person who the decision is being made about, that is the person who should decide. Not some straight cis white dude sitting in a parliamentary seat all cushy, never has to worry about abortion. Why is he making a decision about a woman who might really not have the resources to bring another child into the world? Maybe there are other risks involved. Maybe she's in an abusive relationship.
Maybe she was raped. Maybe there was an incest pregnancy.
Exactly. So that was a key point that we raised as well, that there are no provisions for, exceptions in cases of rape or incest. So like we mentioned, a doctor performing an abortion on a woman who was raped can go to jail for between 10 and 99 years. That is longer than the rapist would go to jail if that person was prosecuted. That is disgusting and ridiculous. So you're telling me that it's better from a religious and whatever else standpoint that a woman who is raped should be forced to carry that pregnancy through and to have that child and to have to live through that trauma. And if a doctor decides to help her out of that situation, that doctor can go to jail for longer than the rapist. I'm sorry, but you cannot justify that in any way, with any justification, with any reasoning. It is just despicable.
Yeah, so for all of these reasons, both of us firmly believe that abortion should be safe, free, and legal for anybody
exactly
who needs to get an abortion or wants to.
And again, I will just reiterate, if it is against your personal ethics, your personal moral beliefs, your religious beliefs, whatever it is, don't get an abortion.
Yeah.
That's fine. Part of being pro-choice means that we completely respect your choice to not engage in that activity. You don't have to have an abortion. Luckily for you, Paul, you probably don't ever need to have to worry about that because your body will physically never
need one.
Or
one. Yeah.
So it's not really going to be an issue in your life. Even if it's someone in your life who you care about and love and respect is completely anti getting an abortion, that's totally fine. And we completely support and respect that decision. And we think that if that is something that you are opposed to, you personally should never have to be forced to have an abortion. Just like other women who are seeking that medical care should not be prevented from accessing that, because it is just healthcare.
And I also just find it really difficult to respect any opinion or any religion that infringes on the free choice of any people. So that's where we stand. Hopefully that makes it clear.
Yeah, and you know what? You're totally within your rights to disagree with us vehemently. That's fine. We respect that as well. But we, as a podcast, and I can confidently say this for both of us, we are all about rights and equality for all people. And that is just it, and we're not ever going to change on that.
And if your opinion, or your free speech, as people want to call it, doesn't respect the rights and equality of all, caps all people, then it's irrelevant and we don't respect your opinion.
Yeah, we respect you as a person, but we cannot respect an opinion that violates the rights of others.
I also just want to point out that from my perspective, if you have an opinion or you want to express something, that you also need to be willing to accept the consequence of that. So, for example, someone like Richard Spencer, who feels like in his blog he has the right to his freedom of speech and expresses racist sentiments, he needs to accept the consequence that he may be in an interview on the street and get punched in the face. You need to accept that consequence because his free speech doesn't respect the freedom of other people to even exist.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. You know, I think this centrist idea of everybody's opinion is equally relevant. I'm sorry, I struggle to respect that or agree with it.
Yeah, so that's where we stand on abortion. Pro-choice, and we always will be pro-choice. And if you don't ever want to get an abortion yourself, then we respect that too. Moving on to the next part of the email. Gary Yourofsky is a legend. This is my opinion, which is obviously not the same as yours. The amount of good that he has done for the vegan movement far outweighs some of his controversial speeches. At the end of the day, why are we vegan? For me, it's for the animals. Gary has more than likely converted more people to veganism than any other person. The more vegans, the more animals saved, and I'm very happy with this. Nobody said this movement would be easy, and sometimes it can be very uncomfortable. I don't personally approve of the wording which he used. The man is passionate and definitely went over the top. I don't believe you can simply just tell people to completely ignore him. Let people listen to him and make their own decisions. Once again, you seem to have focused on the negative rather than the more positive actions. I will leave you with this thought. Nelson Mandela was directly involved in the murder of many people during his anti-apartheid movement, murder being the ultimate crime. Yet he is remembered as a hero, and rightly so for what he did. Gary has killed no person. So I'm going to respond to this to start. Paul, it's really, really concerning to me that you start off saying that Gary Yourofsky is a legend, and you acknowledge that some of the wording he uses is not something you approve of. And you acknowledge that he went over the top. I think it's a major, major problem that people underestimate the power and importance of language. Language is so important. It shapes our cultural views, it shapes our social views, it shapes how we see and interact with the world, and it eventually shapes our behavior and our actions. You cannot underestimate the power of language. If someone is spewing hate speech, it is a problem because it incites hateful action. So, yes, he may have convinced a lot of people to go vegan. Great. When I first saw his speech, I thought it was pretty solid. He makes good points. He makes a lot of logical points. But as we said, he's not the only person who has made convincing arguments for veganism. So why would we want to promote someone who is directly encouraging really problematic, really sexist ideas and violent ideas?
And racist ideas.
Exactly. So I see what you're saying, that yeah, he's done a lot of good, so let's promote that, let's focus on that for the animals. But you know what, Paul, like, for the animals only goes so far, because you say we're being divisive. What is divisive is promoting somebody who outright says that someone wearing fur should be violently and viciously raped so that they're scarred for life. I don't know if you realize this, but that kind of thinking, when he's talking about how he wants evil things to happen to so-called evil people, and when he talks about evil people, he's talking about people who not only run the animal agriculture industries, but also participate in them. You, a month ago, okay, probably more now that we're reading this, let's say 2 months ago, Paul, he's referring to you. He's referring to myself and Pete a couple of years ago.
Or himself before he was vegan.
Yeah, so what I think you're failing to see here is that we are not in favor of promoting this guy because he is saying that me and Pete and everyone we know and you yourself, Paul, he would have said, if he met you a couple of months ago, that you should be violently raped because you were consuming dairy even as a vegetarian, and cows have to be forcefully impregnated and artificially inseminated to produce calves so that those calves can be taken away and killed so that we can have milk that is not intended for us. So a few months ago, your legendary Gary Yourofsky would have told you to be viciously attacked.
Yeah.
So tell me he's a legend.
Yeah. I mean, how divisive is it for any person who can be raped, any rape victim, any Palestinian person? I mean, how many people has he put off veganism? I just wanted to make some points about some of Paul's other points. He says, Gary has more than likely converted more people to veganism than any other person. There's no way to measure this, so I'm actually just not going to agree or disagree. But like we said, we don't really think that's very relevant. I mean, I'm sure some people could say Earthling Ed has converted more people to veganism than anyone else. There's really no way for us to measure this, so I don't think it's worth arguing over.
I also just want to add to that, even if that's true, I think if we are uncritical about people like this, and we say, yeah, but the good he's done is outweighed the negative, think for a second, if he was like a serial killer or a child abuser or something like that, would we also ignore those actions in favor of, how many vegans he's made? Because you also have to think, if someone has inspired you, you're likely to read more of their work, you're likely to watch more of their videos. So do we really want to be inspiring people to adopt veganism with these underlying attitudes? So do we want to make more vegans that are also going to want to attack non-vegans? If
Exactly.
we're talking about being divisive, yeah, he might make a lot of people vegan with his speech. Thank goodness he's retired now, but even the recording of his speech. But how many people are going to want to go vegan if they hear the stuff that everyone could disagree with, the violent rhetoric that he spews? That is divisive. That is saying, I don't care about women and I don't care about rape victims. And, he's saying that animals matter so much that we can just be violent to each other and, let's engage in violent behavior towards people who are non-vegan just because they don't have the information yet. That is
Exactly.
divisive.
Maybe this is a bit harsh, but I also find him to be extremely arrogant, retiring from activism. How arrogant can you get? And calling the speech the best speech you'll ever hear. But anyway, those are my own personal issues. Paul also said, I don't believe you can simply just tell people to completely ignore him. Let people listen to him and make their own decisions. We aren't stopping anybody. We played some of his clips. I would personally actually think it's a good idea for people who think critically to go and watch some of his videos. Like Taryn mentioned in the last episode, one of the reasons why we think he's also problematic is because of how confusing and inconsistent he is. So if you watch some of his videos, he also self-identifies as in the one video as a comedian philosopher, and to take what he says with a pinch of salt. But then also says that line of, as usual, I'm right, you're wrong, checkmate, fuck you. So it's really just really difficult to figure out where he stands and actually what his opinions are, and struggle to take him seriously. Honestly, we aren't, you say let people listen to him, we aren't stopping people from listening to him, but we also aren't going to promote him. And actually, I will actively tell people not to listen to him if he comes up in any conversation.
Yeah, the last thing I would want to do is get a non-vegan to listen to him and come across one of those videos, because that is really going to dissuade people from going vegan. If I have to say to a feminist friend, hey, listen to the speech, and then they happen to click on the next interview and he's advocating for sexual assault, that's not going to make anyone go vegan.
Or anyone who's, on the side of the Palestinians or sympathetic to the Palestinians with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, go watches a video and he says Palestinians are the most psychotic people on the face of the earth.
Yeah, that if that's not divisive, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And, on the point of him being confusing, this is why people like yourself, Paul, are in support of this guy, because he does make a lot of really good, solid arguments. We're not denying that. But the fact that is coupled with such problematic language, we can't underestimate that, because on the one hand, he's making these solid arguments, and on the other hand, people are calling him out for saying the most disgusting stuff. And instead of apologizing and saying, you know what, I was in a bad space or I went over the top, like you said, he just got passionate. He didn't just get passionate. He didn't just go over the top because he has never apologized.
He's never apologized, never taken one thing back, which to me, again, feeds to that idea I have of him just being extremely arrogant.
Yeah, his only like non-apology was basically, yes, I said those things, but I just wished it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying someone should do these things. I'm sorry, if you wish for something, you actually actively want it to come true.
And it's his fantasy for some people to get raped.
I mean, come on.
So, honestly. I also think that it's really just kind of an unfair comparison to use Mandela and Yourofsky. I actually really don't appreciate that indirectly Paul is saying that Gary has killed no person, thereby indirectly saying he's better than Mandela because Mandela kills people. But anyway, I'll leave that point and just say, Mandela was a member of the oppressed. Gary Yourofsky is speaking on behalf of animals. He himself faces no oppression. So I just think it's a kind of irrelevant and unfair analogy to use.
Yeah, I also agree that that's not a fair comparison at all. Also, a lot of the murders that went on in opposition to apartheid were very necessary and part of like a very violent struggle, whereas it is really not necessary to advocate for sexual assault of someone who is complicit in a system that they have been raised in and are largely unaware of. Just like yourself, I'm sure, Paul, I'm sure you were not aware of all of the atrocities within systems that exploit animals, or you would have gone vegan a lot sooner, I'm sure. So, is it fair to say that when you were ignorant, you should have had violence inflicted upon you? Of course not, because you needed that education. And he is advocating for that. He's saying if you're complicit with no caveat for being informed, it's just like you're complicit, you should be attacked.
Yeah. And talking about sexual assault, Paul also says murder being the ultimate crime. Sorry, but I have to disagree. That's purely subjective opinion, but I don't think that murder is the worst. Especially
in the context of a struggle like apartheid. It's not the same as just killing some person for no reason. And especially when we're talking about things like sexual assault, there are a lot of sexual assault victims who are suicidal and who would have rather been killed than endure the trauma that they endured. So I think that is just a completely unfair comparison to make. And I don't think that unless you have endured those traumas yourself, you have any right to say that murder is the ultimate crime when you haven't gone through the kind of things that Yourofsky is advocating for.
Yeah. Yeah, and not just sexual assault victims. I mean, people who get tortured for a long time may prefer death. People who don't have the will to live anymore and want assisted suicide, that some people would call that murder. So it's really subjective. And I think problematic to say murder is the ultimate crime.
Yeah, and I think if you are only going to look at people from their merits or perceived merits and ignore all the other problematic stuff, then you're on a seriously dangerous downward spiral to just oppressing other groups in your attempt to tackle one form of oppression.
And we see this pretty often, right, with the sexual assault charges lodged against a lot of people in the animal rights movement that are for the animals, that are vegan, that understand speciesism and animal liberation, but who get forgiven basically and have the allegations swept aside because for the animals, while creating massive division within the movement.
Yeah, essentially what that's doing is creating this context where the message to the activists and potential vegans and potential activists is, this is not a safe space for you. That's the message that's going to a large proportion of activists, is that we want to have as many activists here as possible for the animals. This is not a safe space for you, and we don't care about your rights, but please come fight for the animals. I mean, that's such a conflicting, dangerous way to advocate.
Yeah, exactly.
But moving on to the final point of the email, Paul has said, please focus more on the positives. Vegans are few and far between. Yes, we are growing, which is very positive. Let's work together and stop promoting this divisive thinking. Thank you for the podcast. I welcome any response for the animals.
Okay, so I just want to talk about us personally, because I think it's important, because a lot of this kind of seems like it's a problem with the podcast, a problem with us and the way we think. Both of us have been vegan for a long time and activists for a large portion of that time. Neither of us are trying to be divisive or even negative necessarily. The main reason why we are responding to this and why we included it in this episode is because we've felt similar sentiments from a few people. So we just thought it was good to address. But both Taryn and I are always going to value critical thought over positive thought and optimism. Critical thought is the main point of the podcast, I would say. And we want people to think critically about things, not cynically, but critically. So the podcast is always going to be about critical thoughts, about, straight talk.
Yeah, and even people we know have said to us they've listened to the podcast and it's made them angry, and then it's made them think. And other people have said, you guys are quite harsh, or you come across quite hectically, like you're so intense. And we know that. We know we are. We're intense people. We're angry about a lot of stuff. And we have called the podcast Let's Rage Together. So, I understand where you're coming from, Paul. I understand that we're not these like peace and love, hippie type, happy-go-lucky vegans trying to spread love and spread acceptance and all of this stuff. We are trying to spread acceptance, but, not in that kind of way. We are not a podcast to make new vegans. We're not a Veganism 101. We're not a feel-good podcast. We created this podcast to encourage critical thought and critical discussion. We are totally okay with people getting angry when they listen to us. We want them to get angry because we're angry. We're angry about a lot of injustices in the world, not just with regards to veganism, but feminism and other social justice issues. We are fucking angry. Yeah. And that's okay, because in some parts of our lives, we're pretty calm, we're pretty chilled, we're easygoing people, but there are some issues that are worth getting angry about, and this is the place where we rant about those. And we realize that we sometimes come across harsh, and we come across pretty uncompromising and no bullshit, and that's just the kind of people we are, and it's totally okay if that's not your vibe.
Yeah, and this is our platform to be like that and to rage together. Also, the subtitle of the podcast is Total Liberation Podcast. That comes from Steve Best's theory of total liberation. So we aren't only about veganism and animal liberation. Total liberation encompasses liberation of all. So I would highly recommend going in and reading some of Steve Best's theory. You don't even need to get his book, Total Liberation. There's a lot of blog posts that speak about it. We really embrace his theory of total liberation, and that's what the podcast is about.
And just on that note, I just want to clarify as well that we are not anti-positivity. If we were not optimistic at all or positive at all about the vegan movement or about total liberation or about any social justice issues, we would not be doing this podcast. We spend a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of resources putting this podcast together because we want to create a space where people can vent a little bit and get angry about these things and talk about them and have critical discussions and challenge their own thinking and, even do what you did, Paul, and email us and challenge our thinking and argue with us and debate with us. We are totally open to that. We're open to discussion about anything, and we have never claimed to be experts on anything. We've never claimed to have all the answers. We've never claimed to know how to make a vegan world or the best way to go about doing vegan activism. Not at all. We are here to be critical of our own thinking as much as everyone else around us. And I think that it's important for us to also just use this opportunity to say that we are generally, in many ways, pretty positive people as well. We think critically and we get angry about things, but if we weren't in some way optimistic, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. It's not something that's making us money. It's actually costs us money and costs us a lot of time. So we're not doing this for popularity points. We're not doing this to make money. We're not doing this because we just want to be angry and negative. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think that there was some benefit to making people think, even if it means that you don't really like us or you're going to get angry with some of the stuff we say, because I think a lot of the problems in the world come from people being in their comfort zone and not being pushed out of that.
Exactly. So we want people to get out of their comfort zones. We want you to wrestle and have internal conflict. That's fine. And
debate with us. If you disagree with us, I personally definitely want to learn. If I say something or Pete says something that you disagree with and you have solid reasons for disagreeing with it, please like email us, comment on some of our posts, whatever, like engage with us, because we definitely want to wrestle with those thoughts as well. And we want to grow and we want to learn and we want to challenge ourselves. And yeah, we're open to that. So,
and I think it's problematic to think that we should be positive even to the point of excusing harmful or negative views or behavior. I don't think it makes us negative to tackle what we perceive as negative. It is our own opinions, like you said, like Paul said, and this is the platform for us to express that. Just like anyone else can start a podcast, you don't have to listen to it. No one's forcing anyone to. But I personally believe that unbridled optimism can sometimes be very ignorant and even to the point of being dangerous. When I was in Europe, people, more centrist and conservative people, would argue, there's this rise of fascism and we should just ignore the neo-Nazis and the neo-fascists, because we are giving them airtime and giving them attention and stuff by confronting them, by acknowledging them. And that is really, really dangerous, because anyone who's seriously and critically studied fascism and history will know that by its very nature, it wants to grow and spread. So ignored, it will do that. And that's why I personally believe that fighting it actively and groups like Antifa are extremely important. And maybe people will say, oh, that's focusing on the negatives, but it's super important. And just focusing on the positives and ignoring the negatives, like I said, can be super ignorant and super dangerous.
Yeah, and I just also want to add, when it comes to negativity or perceived negativity and anger, I think that anger can be a very negative thing, but it can also be a very positive driver. And I think that this is a place where we express a lot of our anger about a lot of issues. And one thing that I really wish a lot of people would understand, and I felt this very strongly when we did the episode on feminism, and often when I have discussions about feminism, and if you, I'm sure, speak to a lot of people who are advocates for racial justice, one thing that I think a lot of people miss when they are talking about anger and essentially telling people to calm down. If you yourself have not experienced the issue of justice or the oppression that is being discussed, please do not tell people to calm down.
Or to be more positive.
If you do not identify as a woman and you have not experienced sexual harassment or sexual assault or sexism and had that lived experience, please do not tell women to calm down talking about feminist issues, because you do not understand the lived experience and you do not understand where that anger comes from. In the same way, if you are not a person of color, do not tell a person of color to calm down when they are talking about issues that affect their lived experience every single day. If you are a male identifying person, do not tell a woman or a person with a uterus to calm down talking about matters of abortion, because that is not your issue. So yes, engage, yes, debate, but I think it's just a point that I wanted to raise is that anger has a place, and anger is justified a lot of the time. If it is not your issue, then
learn to shut up and listen.
Yes, basically.
Because it's also just as problematic to police how any of those people respond when someone does or says something that triggers those things.
Yeah.
So also in terms of, a lot of vegans, and I feel like a lot of vegans who have quite single issue, I would say, views on just focusing on animals, use the term for the animals a lot. And animal liberation, for me, and I'm sure for you as well, Taryn, encompasses the human animal. Human struggles matter too, and animal rights activists are humans and deal with them. So they are really important. If we're going to create a strong, inclusive movement, it's important to include them. And if we want other people to be sympathetic towards animal liberation, it's important to include them. So we are also for the animals, in quotes.
And we are ethical vegans. We're not in this for health or anything like that. So we are ethical vegans just like you are.
And we realize just how urgent things are, and that's why we come across as harsh and possibly negative or cynical when we are trying to be critical, because we understand how serious of an issue it is. It's a big deal. We need to fight and deal with things right fucking now.
And that's not to say that anyone listening doesn't understand the urgency. We're not saying that, we understand better than anyone, but that is why we are so urgent, and that is why we come across quite hectically sometimes. And just on what you were saying now, Pete, is that when looking at the human animal, if we are saying that we are only for the animals and other issues of social justice or for other social justice movements, and they are fighting that fight and we're fighting this fight, we are essentially saying to all of those groups of people, we don't care about your struggles, but please care about this.
Exactly. And that's really problematic and very, very divisive.
Yeah.
We saw this in the recent thing that everybody's been talking about with that activist grabbing the mic from Kamala Harris, where they get up and grab the mic and say, I have I have a bigger idea to talk about. She's talking about the wage gap for women of color.
And they're a white male presenting person grabbing the mic from a woman of color just doesn't do anything for veganism.
They came across as an absolute idiot, sorry. It's my opinion.
Yeah. But anyway, so Paul, I think we've unpacked your email quite extensively, and hopefully you don't think we were too harsh or too negative, but we are pretty strong in our views and they are what they are. So even if you still disagree with us, which I'm sure you do on a lot of issues, that's fine. We totally respect you as a person. We're not always going to respect your opinions, and we don't expect you to respect ours, but we are really not horrible people. We are just critical thinking, and we get angry sometimes, and that's what we do here. So there are a lot of YouTube channels, there are a lot of podcasts who will probably present these ideas in a much more friendly, more palatable way, and that's totally fine. Like, if you want to listen to those things, we totally support that. But if you're listening to this and you want to get angry about stuff, then we're here all day.
Yeah.
Not really. We're here for at least an hour a month.
Yeah. And if anyone's ever in Johannesburg and you want to meet up for lunch with us, or you want to just message us on any of our social media platforms or anything, we're down, And the lunch thing, especially if you can pay and we can fulfill our desire for vegan desserts,
Yeah,
maybe,
if you want to fund our treat habit.
maybe you'll discover that we actually can be quite nice people.
Yeah.
So thanks again for your email, Paul, and I hope you and whoever was listening got something out of it.
Or at least understand our perspective a little bit clearer.
Yeah, but we'd love to hear any feedback. So
Yeah.
you can email us on letsragetogetherpodcast@gmail.com if you want to get in touch, or get in touch with us via Instagram or Facebook at Let's Rage Together. We also got another listener email from Mike H.
Yeah, so Mike says, hello there, Taryn and Pete. Wanted to share some mental struggles I've been having over the last year or so and see if you have ever shared in any of these before. They've been causing me a not so small bit of grief. I've been vegan for about 5 years now, and my politics have been sliding further and further to the left over the last 10 years.
Awesome.
Yes, go Mike. The struggle is that with the world/environment/society in the state that it is in today is increasingly frustrating to operate in and fight against, and leaves me feeling overwhelmed. In these times, I tend to tap out and overindulge in escapism, i.e. science fiction, horror, video games, things I've loved all my life. It's hard to reconcile taking some time for self-care with things that are produced by a society that I view as purposefully distracting at its core. For example, playing video games or buying cheap plastic toys when the companies producing them exploit workers, create waste and environmental degradation, etc. It leads me to feelings of guilt for enjoying it and not putting my time and effort into more meaningful pursuits. Am I alone in this?
Mike, you are not alone in this.
You're definitely not alone, Mike.
I relate to this so hard. So for me, it's been more things recently, like running. I watch series, I read a lot. Lately, I've been trying to read less heavy things and reading more mellow things, and I definitely experience this guilt a lot too. I should be fighting, I should be making a difference, I should be making an impact. And I think it is actually quite a problematic thing within kind of activist circles or activist-minded people, that they have this idea, because inherently they'll be quite sensitive people, and we are quite sensitive people. We often also buy into this myth that we have to do stuff to create value for ourselves. We have to do something meaningful to feel like we're worth taking up space. And I just want to say, for the first points that I have to make, that that's not true. You have inherent value as a human being. There's nothing you have to do to make yourself worthy of anything. You can just by being here, you are worthy, you know. Personally, I don't see anything wrong with you finding escapism in these things. And we actually did an episode on self-care that I would encourage people to go listen to. I can't remember the episode number, but we don't have that many episodes out right now, so
we can't really remember so far back because this is like our 12th episode.
yeah.
I think it was like 4, 5, 3, 2, 3.
Just scroll for a second through the episodes and you'll
Yeah,
find
literally one scroll of the mouse and it'll be like, oh, there it is.
But I think I and a lot of people totally will relate to you in feeling overwhelmed by just how fucked everything feels. So I personally don't think that there's an issue in escapism. And as far as your point goes in terms of purchasing things where you question the ethical nature of their manufacture, I think a lot of people feel that too, and I feel that too, but I also believe that there's no real ethical consumption under capitalism, and you're going to find problematic things and people or the environment or non-human animals getting exploited somewhere along the line of production. So unfortunately, I feel like while the system of capitalism exists and we live in it, that's going to be an issue that we face constantly. Not saying you shouldn't be more conscious of your consumer choices, just that we don't have as much positive impact with our buying power as people think. So that's what I wanted to say about it. I'm sure Taryn has a lot more better and important things to add on.
Jeez, no pressure, hey? No, I agree with everything you've said, Pete. And Mike, I think guilt should just die in a fire.
Yeah, I agree.
I totally get where you're coming from. I also enjoy reading, and I feel really guilty lately, even thinking about reading something that's fiction, because I'm like, what am I learning from this? I should be reading a non-fiction book. I should be learning something. I should be educating myself. But that is ridiculous.
And you do often learn a lot through fiction.
Totally.
You know? I mean, many of the most important books in history have been fiction.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, firstly, your feeling of overwhelm is completely normal. And I think we can both relate to that in a big way, because there is so much to tackle. And it does sometimes feel like, how can we take a breather when there are so many people and so many animals struggling and suffering constantly? How can we just sit and chill?
And how hard is it to have motivation when scientists are warning of imminent, complete environmental collapse in like 12 years?
Yeah, like the world's doomed, you know.
It's really overwhelming.
Yeah, sometimes it's easy to just be like, well, we might as well give up. So that feeling of overwhelm is definitely not unique to you. I think most activists feel that pretty constantly. But then on the point of escapism, I think to an extent, escapism is really important, whether it's through games or reading or just chilling, doing whatever. I think it's really important. Obviously, if your form of escapism is like heavy indulgence in substances, that's maybe not such a good idea. But things like video games, I don't think there's an issue with. I think you just have to be honest with yourself and think about where those feelings of guilt are coming from. If it's coming from a sense of social responsibility, so how can I sit and relax and engage in this thing that I enjoy when there's so many issues in the world, that is the kind of guilt that I think should just die in a fire.
Watching Netflix stressfully.
Yes, actually, Pete and I have discussed this a few times. Engaging in activities where you're not actually relaxing because you're just thinking, oh, I should be doing something else. I should be doing something more meaningful. That's not really self-care. You're just stressing yourself out. So one thing that we've actually had a couple of discussions about this just in friendly conversation, and something I've been thinking about a lot, which maybe will help you, Mike, is the concept of intentionality and really being intentional with your time. So if you are going to play video games, for example, or whatever it might be that you're seeing as a form of escapism, be intentional about it and realize, you know what, this is part of my self-care. It's important to switch off sometimes, because you cannot be engaged in activism or thinking about social issues 24/7, because you will just burn out. Even if you're not actively going out on the streets and doing activism, if you're just thinking about these issues constantly, it's going to weigh heavily on you. So when you need those breaks, take them, but be intentional and say, okay, I'm going to do this for X amount of time, and I'm not going to feel guilty. I'm not going to worry about anything else. This is what I'm doing, and this is part of my self-care. I think if your guilt is coming from overindulging, so if you find that you're engaging in these activities and it's taking away from something else in your life, so if it's affecting your relationships with family or friends, or if you're spending so much time on these things that you're not getting things done that you want to do, or if you are kind of feeling depressed afterwards or feeling like you've wasted your day and you're not feeling relaxed afterwards, then I would say that's something to be concerned about. You should feel relaxed after engaging in a relaxing activity. You should not feel more stressed, which is something I struggle with a lot. I struggle a lot with thinking, oh, I need a break from studying, or I need a break from whatever. I'm just going to watch Netflix, and then I end up feeling overwhelmed and tired, and I just watch 3 episodes of something, and then I'm like, shit, I just wasted 3 hours of my life and I don't even feel calm. I just feel more stressed. That's a problem. So that's where I think intentionality is so important, is carving out specific amounts of time and putting limits on yourself in terms of what is healthy for you, but is also not affecting you negatively in other ways.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, I've had to experiment a lot with this myself, having been through, some hard times and heavy mental periods, is to find out what kind of escapism works for you. So, for example, I really struggle to disconnect heavy elements even in fiction from reality, and I find myself ruminating and thinking about them a lot. So, for example, in certain series, I really struggle with Game of Thrones. It's because of how violent it is, and I really struggled with some scenes in Narcos to forget about it. So for me, it's really not a good idea after a heavy day to sit down and consume a heavy form of entertainment that just makes me feel shit. So I would rather watch a comedy series or watch a nature documentary. If you're feeling stressed and you wake up and you end up spending 2 hours browsing Instagram, probably not as good of idea as doing a meditation or having a bath or going for a 2-hour walk in nature. I think the forms of escapism are also important. And like Taryn said, the amount of time you spend on it. So if you suddenly find that you've spent 6 hours playing video games, maybe you need to just adjust the time period or be stricter with yourself. Or rather than play video games stressfully for multiple hours, give yourself the permission to completely relax for 1 hour playing video games, And it also depends, again, like I said, on the video game. Maybe there's a video game like Grand Theft Auto that's really problematic and heavy and is going to make you feel shit. So maybe play a different video game that's not going to, also with the podcasts you listen to, the books you read, everything.
Except ours. Ours is not heavy, we promise.
Yeah.
It's angry, but it's not heavy. So keep listening to us. We'll bring some positive vibes now and then just to up the mood,
I personally get really stimulated by critical thinking. So it depends on the type of person you are as well. But it would be great if people listen to the podcast.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point you were making about choosing the kind of escapism and the kind of activity you're engaging in. I was going to say something similar in that, for example, I've never really been into gaming at all. But I know in high school there was a period of time where I was super amped on first-person shooter games like Splinter Cell. But I would spend days on end, not even wanting to shower, just playing these games. And that was cool at the time. But I know now, sometimes someone will show me look at this new game, look at the graphics. And I'm like, oh, that looks amazing. But I'm never going to play it. Because I know I will get sucked in and I will spend days on end and I'll just feel like shit afterwards because I haven't done anything productive. So I think you also have to be mindful of, you can enjoy something, but what is it adding to your life? And I've found that I've started to think more critically about those decisions that I'm making and base them not just on enjoyment or feeling relaxed afterwards, but also what it's actually adding. Life is really fucking short.
Yeah.
So I don't really want to be spending days on end playing a game.
Yeah.
I would far rather read books or go on a hike or do something like that. So that ties in as well to what you were saying about buying things that come from problematic industries. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Everything is problematic pretty much. Everything you buy is going to have some level of exploitation at some level. And we can't really escape that in the current system that we're in. So just maybe look at the activities you're engaging in and ask yourself whether there are alternatives that would make you feel less guilty or fulfill you in a better way. Like, instead of playing video games, can you go on a hike with some friends? That's probably going to be more rewarding for you. And, maybe it won't be. Maybe you just want to play games, and that's totally fine.
Personally, in the last couple of years, I've started to really value more basic, simple ideas. So forms of escapism that make my life better and help me to cope more. So I've really started to put value in things like taking naps and like trying to get really good quality sleep, being in nature. In terms of buying things, minimalism and that kind of mindset helps me a lot. I also was really into collecting things, from comics to records, and I just kind of stopped. Or actually, I didn't stop, because I still collect records and I still collect some things. But like you said, intentionality is really important. So when I buy things, and the things that I have in my house are things I either need or things that I really want to be there. And I feel like they do add value either out of sentiment or because I actually really gain enjoyment from having them.
I think that's a really good point. And then I think, taking all these points into consideration, I think a really, really useful thing to remind yourself that I personally struggle with a lot, and I think you do as well, Pete, is that we sometimes just need to remember to be a little bit kinder to ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we are all super hard on ourselves, especially when you start to think about all the issues in the world currently and how many struggles there are and how much work there is to be done, and feeling guilty about even the smallest enjoyment, because there are people literally, dodging bombs right now and struggling with daily traumas and the horrors that animals are enduring every day. It is really overwhelming, and it does make it really easy to feel guilty about anything and just feeling like you're a shit person for doing anything, And I think that's probably the most valuable thing that we can do, is to just be a little bit kinder, not only to ourselves but to each other as well, and be patient with ourselves. And I'm terrible at this.
And I'm too.
Pete will be the first to also say that I'm the worst at taking my own advice.
Taryn really gives amazing advice in general, but she sucks at taking her own advice, honestly. That's the thing you're probably the worst at.
I really am. I'll acknowledge it. I'll tell you to drink water every day, and I don't drink water nearly as much as I should. I'll tell you to engage in self-care and exercise and good sleep, and I do none of those things, but I'm trying. But I think, again, just being kinder to yourself. If you screw up, it's fine. If you spend a whole day like engaging in some kind of escapism activity that you regret afterwards, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it's
happens.
Fine. It happens. We're all human.
Yeah.
Like, whatever you need to do to get by, like, we're all doing our best. We're all just trying to cope from day to day and trying to be less shitty. And that's rad. If you're trying to be less shitty every day and you're learning and you're growing and you're coping, then you're doing okay.
Yeah, I think you could even say the animals maybe need you to have escapism so that you don't burn out.
Yes, that is another point that I wanted to raise as well, is that feeling guilty for self-care is doing an injustice to everyone around us, to friends, to family, to the people and animals that we fight for. If we don't look after ourselves, there is no way we will have the capacity to look after anyone else or to help anyone else. You have to, the cliche, fill your own cup first or whatever, whatever the saying is. But it's true.
Yeah.
If you don't look after yourself and you're at like rock bottom, there's no ways you're going to be able to help anyone else. So when you feel overwhelmed, take a time out.
Yeah, it's important. It's important to be aware of that. If at the moment in your life you need to focus on yourself, what you enjoy, put number one first, then do that. For now, it's all right, and then you can go back to whatever you were doing.
Yeah, and I've actually been doing that lately. It's really hard for me to say no to commitments or to helping people or to get rid of responsibilities that I've taken on. And the last year, I've actually done that quite a lot. I've said no to a lot of things. I've stepped down from a lot of responsibilities. And for a long time, that felt really shit, to just be like, oh, I'm just giving up on these things, or I'm backing out of my responsibilities. But I was honestly reaching a point where I wasn't coping with much, actually, and feeling run down and burnt out and tired all the time, and realizing that, I'd committed to a whole range of things that I was no longer able to give much to at all. And that's just pointless.
Yeah.
It's pointless just feeling this responsibility to say yes to everything and to just, have some small part to play in helping wherever you can, because eventually you're not actually helping. You're just actually getting in the way. And that was quite hard for me to realize. And I haven't really been doing much activism other than the podcast lately. And that's fine, actually. Sometimes I feel guilty and I think, geez, when last have I actually done anything useful? But again, we have to just be kind to ourselves.
Yeah, you should be, because you are very harsh on yourself. But honestly, I'm really proud of you for how you've bowed out of certain things.
Oh, thanks, Pete. See, this is like a real positive, loving. This is a positive podcast right here. Look at us being all like love and light.
Are you wearing tie-dye? Oh no, it's just the light.
Next week I'll be wearing tie-dye.
Okay. But yeah, thank you for the emails, and thank you to everybody for listening. It's really cool to get feedback from people, no matter if it's positive or negative. We love hearing it. So again, if anybody has feedback, message us on Instagram or Facebook at Let's Rage Together, or send us an email on letsragetogetherpodcast@gmail.com.
Email preferably, because if you message us on Facebook, probably only Pete will see it and he'll probably forget to tell me about it. So you'll think we're just ignoring you, but we're not. Just rather email us.
Yeah, letsragetogetherpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and also on the note of Mike's email and self-care, if you have any really good self-care tips or any further suggestions for Mike, because a lot of us are feeling similar things, please email those as well so that we can read them out in the next episode.
If anybody really liked what they heard and they're feeling very positive towards us and you want to support us, then we have Patreon, we have PayPal, we have merch you can buy, you can tell people about the podcast, you can share it far and wide. We have a website where all of this stuff, including links to our social media, email,
and
Patreon,
where you can
PayPal,
listen.
And the actual episodes.
But you obviously know that because you're listening.
Yeah. So the URL is letsragetogether.co.za.
Yeah. So check it out, and especially get on that Patreon because we need money.
Shameless.
Positive
Shameless
money.
self-promotion.
I'm doing I'm manifesting
goodness from the universe.
Yeah. I can see everyone listening just giving us
okay.
dollars every month.
Let's wrap it up.
No, really.
Okay, thank you so much for everyone for listening.
Yeah, thanks Mike for the email as well.
And until next time,
Love and liberation.